Okay, now we've talked about the company valuation, and you've gone through that, and you've gone through due diligence, and you come to a very exciting part of your journey as an entrepreneur when you're actually presented with a term sheet from an investor that says, "I would like to make an investment in your company. Here are my terms." So let's talk about a term sheet, and let's talk about what it contains, what it may contain, and what flexibility you have with respect to how you can negotiate those terms. So the term sheet will always talk about the valuation that they've come up with. They want to invest in your company at a certain valuation. They will also indicate the amount of the investment they want to make, but remember, it's a non-binding document. So even though they say they're going to put some money in, it's not a binding thing, so you have to get to a close. They will talk about the type of investment they want to make. They may say they'll do common stock. They may say they want to do a preferred stock issuance, or they may ask for a convertible note. There's all sorts of different ways that they can make an investment, but they will likely specify that in the term sheet. They also may include in the term sheet some provisions that are protective to the investor in the event of a sale, a merger, or some other liquidation process. And they'll probably specify how the proceeds they're putting into the company should be used. And that'll be based upon what you said you were going to do with them. You said you're going to spend them on sales and marketing and maybe a little bit of administrative costs. They're going to want to make sure that that is exactly what you're going to spend the money on. They might also ask for board representation depending upon the size of the investment they make. And that could be a good thing if the person's a well-known investor and they can provide lots of management guidance and make appropriate introductions into strategic partners, for example, or even other investors. It would be good to have someone like that on the board. So that may be a factor. You have to kind of look at the person, how much are they putting into the company? Should they expect a board seat based upon the level of investment they're making? A lot of people ask for it. Some of them don't, quote unquote, deserve it because they're not putting enough money in to make a board seat really reasonable, a reasonable thing to ask for. Now, they also may have some things in there about the key employees. I'm guessing that they're going to say that at least you as the CEO and perhaps your technical person are going to be key employees, and they're going to want to make sure that those people are tied up with employment contracts and or stock agreements that more or less guarantee that they'll continue to operate in the business and devote 100% of your time to growing the company. There also may be redemption and information rights in there. They may ask for certain covenants and representations. And they're going to basically also discuss, are you paying the expenses of raising this money, or are they? There are expenses in raising money. Every investor is going to have a lawyer who's going to draw up documents, or you'll draw the documents up and present them to the investor, and they will get the lawyer to review them. So there are costs involved, and a lot of term sheets will say that the company will pay the expenses. Now, you can negotiate that and say, okay, we'll pay the expenses, but only to the extent of, let's say, $5,000. I've never paid more than $10,000 on any investment I ever negotiated with an investor, even in the most complicated investment vehicle. So that's a fairly easy one to negotiate. And then they're going to have a closing date, and it's going to say, we have to get this transaction done by a certain point in time. That's good for you because you want to have certainty about when the money is going to come in. But it also keeps the term sheet from hanging out there forever and working a lot of time on it only to never get to a close. So you really want to have a closing date which is reasonable. Most term sheets I've seen are 30 to 60 days. The closing date is 30 to 60 days in the future, which should be enough time for them to continue, finalize their due diligence, do the legal work, and get the funding made. And a term sheet could have a no-shop clause in it, which is something which protects the investor. It doesn't do a whole lot to protect you. What a no-shop says is that during the term of this term sheet, which could be up to 60 days, you as the entrepreneur are not allowed to talk to anyone else about bringing more money in. If you get that type of a term sheet, you should immediately have that taken out if you can, because that protects the investor completely, and it exposes you to taking yourself out of the market. You may be talking to someone else already about investing, and if you take yourself off the market for 60 days. By the time you get back, the person you were talking to may no longer be interested. So I'm very wary around no shop clauses, and I've always been very strong in insisting those be taken out of the term sheet. In most cases, most investors will agree to that, as long as they understand that you're not going to use their term sheet to play off against another investor to negotiate like a Dutch auction. So there are some things you can do to negotiate a term sheet to make it more favorable to you. But the most important thing is to do your homework, be prepared to discuss the term sheet, understand what is needed to close. The investor has some objectives to get done. We talked about that in the valuation discussion. They want to receive a certain percentage of the company when they make the investment. They may want to get into your sector. You have an interest in getting funding and maybe strategic help and management advice. So both sides have an objective. Both sides need to win for this thing to be a good partnership. So try to be creative when you're talking to your investor. Come up with solutions that will be beneficial to both parties. Help them get to the decision to say yes. And by the way, leave your ego out of the deal. I've seen too many early stage entrepreneurs get an offer from a company and act like it was an insult to them. Leave the ego outside the door when you're negotiating a term sheet, and that will help you get to a compromise if you do that. Be consistent in your discussions. Don't change in midstream so that you agree to something and then later on you change your philosophy on that, because even if you don't get this deal done, you may come across this investor in the future and you may want them to invest in either the current company at a different level or a new company. So try to be consistent, because you never know when you're going to run into the investor again. A lot of people try to kind of bluff people through a process, act as if that the money's not important to them, or act like one of the important things to the investor is unacceptable and they won't even consider having it in the deal. If you do that and you don't really mean it, you look foolish, and it almost never works. So don't bluff, be open, be transparent. Try to look at this as a negotiation among people who will eventually become partners in making your company successful. And then learn how to get this thing closed. Eventually you have to get to a point where you say to the investor, okay, you've done the due diligence, we've negotiated the deal, let's fund the company. You have to ask them to say yes, and that's very important. So while you're doing the negotiations, remember that they're negotiating as strongly as you are. They may say some things that may be just posturing themselves to get to a different decision. So don't take everything literally, and understand what their bottom line will be, because they all have a bottom line. They all want something to get done. They wouldn't issue a term sheet if they weren't interested in investing in your company. So try to anticipate what their next step is going to be. Look at the future of your company. Don't try to negotiate your current deal based upon what you've done in the past. Make the deal based upon where the market is currently, not where the market was a year ago. So term sheets are important. They're non-binding deals. They provide you the details of what the investment's going to be. They are negotiable, but let's remember that the investor truly is in the driver's seat in these discussions, and so there are some limitations on how much you can actually negotiate a term sheet. Generally speaking, a short time frame is better, because you don't want the term sheet to get stale. And you don't want to have these no-shop clauses in the deal that take you out of the market, which could be very detrimental if that deal you're working on doesn't get closed. So I hope these tips have helped you. I look forward to hearing feedback on term sheets you may be negotiating, and good luck in raising your next round of funding.